July 27th, 2025 in Laguna Beach. And we're going to explore whether or not we can find God. What do you think?
I think we can.
We think we can, all right. Well, the first question is there a God? Is there a God at all? So, if we take, say, a cushion, like you're all sitting on cushions, take a cushion, that's a pretty simple thing, right? Pretty simple. But actually it's quite complex. If you think about what goes into producing a cushion, there's foam on the inside, there's, in these cushions there, you have some kind of plastic on the outside, which is coming from petroleum. So someone has to drill for the petroleum, someone has to turn the petroleum into plastic. Then you have to get the dye from somewhere, probably in a chemical laboratory. Then someone has to sew it together and make the foam. So it's actually quite complicated and probably involves some work internationally. And you wouldn't have a 2-year-old do it or a chimpanzee, right? So even though it's extremely simple. And if you were to compare that to a living cell, which is so complex that nobody really knows exactly how it works, there's no way that we could say, well, there's not a creator. Nobody created it. It just kind of happened by chance. If something as simple as a cushion or a curtain or something like that couldn't happen by chance, then certainly a living cell couldn't happen by chance. So there's only one good argument against the existence of God. Does anyone know what that is? There's one good logical argument. Why there's so many bad things in the world. So, from a logical point of view, there must be somebody who created everything, and there must be someone who maintained everything, who maintains everything, and keeps it going. But then the question is, can you read that? You can't really read it. Sorry about that.
We can read it.
You can read it? Yeah. Okay, not as good as it should be. So the only logical argument is, why is there evil? Why is there suffering? And of course, people have tried to answer this by saying, well, there's no God. But as soon as you say there's no God, then you really run into the problem of how did we get all the complexity of the world? Or they'll say, well, there's a God, but he's not all-powerful. He just kind of stands around and says, well, I guess people suffer and I can't do anything about it. Or they say he's not all good, that he just lets people suffer. Or some combination. He's not all-powerful, he's not all good. So there's many people who propose that there's almost like a second competitor God, like there's some kind of a devil who's almost as powerful as God and is making bad things happen, and there's kind of this war going on, or competition going on between God and some sort of evil. So in the Vedic literature, the answer to why there is evil and suffering is karma and reincarnation. That when we look at this life, things are certainly unfair. There's no question about it. In this life, innocent people suffer and evil people enjoy. We see it all around us all the time. But if you look at this life as part of a bigger chain of many, many lifetimes, and understand that there is total justice and total balance over many, many lifetimes. I mean, even in this life, right, I was just hearing in the news that somebody had got arrested, and when they found out when he got arrested that he'd also committed, what was that, 35 other crimes? Something like that. So while he was committing those 35 crimes, he wasn't getting arrested, but finally on the 36th one, then he finally got arrested, and all the other crimes he also got charged with. So sometimes we just look at a particular point in time and we say, okay, here's a criminal and they're not suffering, they're getting away with their crimes, but at a certain point, they actually would get arrested. Now that might not happen again in this lifetime, but in the whole cycle of one life after another, this happens to everybody. So whatever we're enjoying in this life, whatever we're suffering in this life, is due to actions that we've performed in other lifetimes. And it's not uncommon for a person to do good work, get good karma, and then once they get good karma, They think, oh, now I'm enjoying. Now I don't have to be a good person anymore. I can use the results of my good karma for evil purposes, and then in the next life, they are suffering. So this is quite common. And then when they're suffering, then they say, oh, now let me become a good person, and now let me pray to God, and now let me be religious. And so this cycle often goes on from one life to another. But once we understand that there's karma and reincarnation, then we understand that everything is perfectly fair and everything is perfectly in balance, even with an all-powerful and all-good God, who doesn't desire that we go through this cycle of karma and reincarnation at all. Of course, karma and reincarnation begs the point, well, how did we get into this? And then the answer to that is our own foolishness. That is our own desire. We have no need, there's no necessity for us to get involved in this cycle of karma and reincarnation, but through our own misuse of our free will. And this may seem very inconceivable, but one way we can compare it is, for example, nobody plans to become an alcoholic, correct? No one says, I'm going to become an alcoholic. What to speak of, I'm going to become an alcoholic who's homeless, lying in the gutter in my own vomit, rejected by my family, lost my job. Nobody plans like that. But people may think, well, I'll just have one drink and it'll be all right. And obviously for some people it is. But for some people, the one drink leads to another, and gradually they become an alcoholic. So in a similar way, we, the free spirit soul, the free entity who lives eternally in grace, we have the capability to think, let me try to become an independent enjoyer. And once we become an independent enjoyer, we may become sucked into this whole cycle, at which point we think, well, why now am I in such a difficult position? But this happens over many lifetimes. So this is the only logical argument against the existence of God, and once we understand karma and reincarnation, this argument evaporates. All right, so we accept that God exists because we know there must be some intelligence behind the creation. But what can we understand about the nature of God? Who is God? Like I can understand somebody designed and created this cushion, but what can I know about the nature of that designer and that creator? So what am I going to understand about the nature of God? So we're going to look at a few items, and then I'm going to ask you all to suggest other things as well. These are snowflakes. That we can know about the nature of God is that God must like variety. The amount of variety there is in this world is astounding. That each snowflake is different from every other snowflake. Why? If I were manufacturing snowflakes, I wouldn't bother. And who's going to look at every snowflake? Each grain of sand is different from any other grain of sand. Look it up and see. Each grain of sand is a work of art. Look at any plant, any tree, and you'll see, are the leaves on any particular plant or tree the same as all the other leaves? No, each leaf is different. And if you look at several trees of the same species, there'll be a little bit different shape, right? A little bit different height. Again, the amount of variety in this world is absolutely astounding. There's, practically speaking, infinite, uncountable variety. So one thing we can know about the nature of the creator and the maintainer is that here's somebody who really likes variety. Again, to an extent that's beyond our comprehension. Like with these chairs are made in a factory and they're all basically the same. But that's not the way the world is. What the world is, everything is a little different, even from things that are very similar to it. Okay, what else can we tell about the nature of God? Okay, so there's patterns. There's repeating patterns in the world. There's repeating cycles in the world. The world is actually full of cycles and patterns. So whoever is the creator also likes order and patterns and cycles. Almost everything goes in a cycle. Yeah, so we've got extreme variety and order, patterns, and cycles. Of course, there's also sometimes surprises. So sometimes there's days that are unseasonal, or sometimes there's storms. So we have this order and seasons and cycles, but every once in a while there's something also surprising. Okay, anything else that we can see about the nature of God? The world is full of beauty. There's beauty everywhere. I remember when I was a kid, I really liked Sherlock Holmes books, and one of the points the fictional Holmes makes, he says, we know that God is good because of the flowers. And Watson says, well, how was that? And Sherlock said, well, it's only good people who give something that's not needed. And we don't need beautiful, fragrant flowers. And I've thought about that a lot. You know, people in jail, the government does not provide flowers, do they? You're going to find flowers in the prison. But we find in this world, there's so much beauty. There's visual beauty, there's auditory beauty, there's olfactory beauty. The world is full of so much beauty. And even the ugly things in nature, as part of the cycles of nature, lead to beauty. Things that decay and rot lead to new life. So we know that whoever's the creator really likes variety in an extreme, order, cycles, patterns, and beauty. And this we can tell just through observation. All right, so I want to ask all of you, looking at the natural world, is there anything else that we could deduce about the nature of the creator? Yes?
Opulence.
Opulence. Yes. Grand mountains and grand waterfalls and huge trees and vast oceans. Yes. What else? Any other thing we could deduce logically about the nature of God just by looking at the world? Yes?
Music.
Music. Yes, the world is actually full of music. The music of the water flowing over rocks, the music of the birds, even the music of the insects. Yes?
Force.
Force. That there's a lot of power in this world. And all of the natural elements hold a lot of power. Even the air, which is, we can't even perceive it directly. But the air is so powerful. All you need is a strong windstorm. Yeah? And it can destroy a whole town. We speak of the force of water, the force of the earth, the force of fire. So we can say that the Creator is very powerful. Anything else we can understand about the nature of God by looking at nature? Yeah?
Seen and unseen.
Seen and unseen. Do you want to explain that?
Just as there are things we see in the world, there's also things that we know exist that we cannot see, like bacteria. We can't see bacteria. We can't see like molecules and things like that, unless we're really using a microscope.
I really like that. I especially like this seen and unseen because it relates to very, very high levels of understanding our relationship with Krishna, and that is meeting and separation. That the love we have of the soul to God in various relationships, which we'll talk about briefly in a few minutes, that this is in the question of meeting and separation, where we're seeing Krishna and then we apparently don't see Krishna. We see Krishna, we apparently don't see Krishna. But this seen and unseen aspect, yes, it's there with everything. What we perceive, there's so much more than what we perceive. We're only hearing a small portion. We're only seeing or smelling or touching a small portion of reality. And we don't even know what we don't know. So the scientists estimate that we can only perceive maybe 5% of the matter in the universe, but we don't know what we don't know. So there's this mystery. Yes, we could also say the nature of the Creator is that there's always some mystery. There's always something more to discover. There's always something more that we don't know. Anything else? Yes?
There is a sense of routine and discipline that you see exists in nature.
Yes.
The seasons change
Yes.
without any order to them. The birds migrate. It
Yes.
has a certain sense of order
Yes.
and discipline to itself, which I think makes life familiar and predictable, and that gives you a sense of peace that you know that fall is going to come.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, so we looked at that, right? The order, the pattern, and the cycles of things is very predictable, with some surprises. With some surprises, not entirely predictable. So when we have a relationship with another person, if that person is not mostly predictable, a relationship is impossible. It's really impossible to have a relationship with a person who's totally unpredictable. At the same time, you want them to be not 100% predictable. You want them to have some mystery and some surprises. So we see that nature is very, very predictable. There's this order, there's cycles, there's patterns, but there's some element of surprise also. Yes? Anything else in nature that we can say about that? We can look at nature and understand something about who is God. Yes?
The natures of the God is really clever, it's more the way how he creates the world, and even the nature moves. We read about everything, like even the rain, how it comes, the rain.
So we're looking at some vast intelligence. I mean, the amount of intelligence that there's there in creation is unfathomable. Even how, each mammal has exactly the right type of milk for its own baby. And that's adjusting. And all the scientists of the world have not been able to figure out how to turn one kind of milk into another kind of milk. If anybody could figure out how to turn cow's milk into human milk, they would become a multi-billionaire overnight. So how much intelligence is that? So inconceivable intelligence. Anything else we can understand? Yes?
Attraction, repulsion.
There's attraction and repulsion. Yes. I like that. This is part of the meeting separation and seen and unseen aspect. Yes?
Merciful, like we get everything what we need, His name is giving us everything what we need.
Not only everything that we need, but beyond what we need.
Beyond what we need.
So, of course, we could say that some people are suffering, but we've already dealt with that question. But who here has more clothes than they absolutely need to wear? Who here has more clothes than they absolutely need to wear? Who has access to more food than they absolutely need to eat? And just think about, again, looking at variety. thinking about the variety of varieties. You know, we don't just have a vegetable. We have many varieties of vegetable. And we don't just have varieties, we have varieties of varieties. We were in the store today and there was a white cauliflower and a golden cauliflower. There were like 7 different kinds of apples. I think there's about 40 different kinds of apples. So we have, you know, varieties of varieties of varieties, which is far, far more than we need. And again, we're looking at here, there's some goodness there to provide more than what you need and more variety than what you need is definitely a sign of someone who is good. All right, we reach, yes?
Transient, impermanent, fleeting, everything has an end.
So we're seeing beginning and end, but we also see a kind of underlying permanence. We see this beginning and end, but yet a permanence to things. So this table was a tree, and before it was a tree, it was sunlight, water, and earth. And eventually it will go back to being light, water, and earth. So the basic elements have permanence, and the forms are constantly changing. And I like that you say that, because when we're going to be looking at more information about Krishna, we'll see that he has also so many varieties of form. All right, we could probably find a few more things, but we definitely reach a limit as to what we can understand about the creator of something just by looking at their creation. A very simple creation like a cushion. You know, we're going to reach a limit. We're going to be able to look how nicely the stitches are put together and kind of the pattern of brown and etc. on the cushion. But it gets to a point that I can't really understand much more about it. I can't understand what nationality this person is from, or how many people were involved in making the cushion, and how many countries, how old they were, what level of education they had, and what they liked to eat for breakfast. I wouldn't be able to tell any of that from examining the cushion. So how can I get information beyond my mind and senses? And by the way, the reason that we can call God the absolute truth, we're meaning what's always true. We're meaning what's always true, beyond something that's relatively true, or that's true sometimes for some people in some situations. We can say that God is always true. So how can we understand beyond just our senses and logic? Well, one way I could know who makes the cushion or who painted the painting is I can be introduced, right? If I say to you, oh, I know the artist, I can introduce you to the artist. I know who made the floor, I can introduce you to that person. So if someone says, well, I've met God, and I can introduce you to God. I can tell you something about God because I've met God. So since the beginning of human history, there's been thousands and thousands and thousands of people who claim to have had some sort of a meeting with God, correct? Yes, in all the religious traditions of the world, just like in the Bible in Exodus, it says Moses saw God face to face, like a friend speaks to another friend. So there's so many examples of people who say, I've met God. Of course, you could also argue that some of them may be lying, some of them may be delusional. You know, if you want to be considered mentally ill, all you have to do is say that you talk to God. Oh, I'm talking to God. Okay, you must have something wrong with your psychology. So certainly there are people who claim to have met God who are just simply unbalanced people, and some people may be lying. But if we're going to take all the thousands of people who claim that they've seen God, that they've had something, that they know something about God, we're going to start finding some commonalities. Also, how could we judge? I mean, this kind of brings it back one level. How could we judge if someone says, well, I actually have met God, I actually have seen God, I can tell you about God from my first-hand knowledge? How could we gauge whether or not we could trust a person?
Whereas a crazy person has other symptoms of being crazy, you can tell that their behavior is maybe erratic, something like that.
Okay, so you want to look at them holistically. And we have, this question is asked in the Bhagavad Gita by Arjuna. He says, how can I tell somebody who actually is above matter, is above material modes? How can I tell someone who's accessed transcendence? How do they behave? How do they speak? What do they do? And Krishna gives a list of symptoms. He gives a list again in the 14th chapter. There are lists of symptoms given in the Bhagavad Purana by Kapila Devi, the 26 qualities of the devotee, which is also given by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So there are lists of things you look for. Very similar to if someone says, like I once met a neurosurgeon, I had to have some surgery done on my arm many years ago, and it was done by a neurosurgeon. And I asked the neurosurgeon, why did you become a neurosurgeon? And she said, well, I thought if I touched the brain, I would find the person. I said, did that work? She said, no, it didn't work, but that was my idea. So how do I know that this person has actually seen a living brain? There are symptoms. The person has their medical degree right up on their wall, and I can check with the medical college to see if they actually got a degree there. And I can ask the other doctors, does this person actually do this kind of surgery? Right? There were symptoms I could check. And then I actually let the person operate on my arm. Right? And my arm got cured. Okay, this is someone who can actually do operations on the nervous system. So in a similar way, one can actually gauge. Now, often people try to gauge a saintly person in the wrong way. Just like with the founder of our Hare Krishna movement, Dasi Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. So my husband told me that he met Prabhupada first in 1970, and he asked him, he said, I'd like to buy a tape recorder to travel with you and record your lectures. What's the best tape recorder to buy? And Prabhupada said, I do not know. And my husband said, oh, this must not be a saintly person. He doesn't know everything. So it's not that someone who's seen God is going to know what is the best tape recorder or is necessarily going to know, that Madame Curie discovered X-rays or something like that. They're not necessarily going to have that kind of knowledge. But I do remember the first time that I met Srila Prabhupada, my father was also there. And when we came out of the room, my father looked at me and says, now I know why you joined this movement. This is a genuine holy man. Now, I never asked my father, I never said to him, how did you come to that conclusion? But in thinking about it, what we saw is that Srila Prabhupada was a totally authentic person. He never had on a mask. He was never pretending to be something that he was not. He was never trying to impress anybody. He was full of humility, he was full of wonder, he was full of exuberance. Again, it's not that he knew everything materially. Not like that. That's not what we're looking for. But he was always full of love for everyone. So we're looking for that. Someone who's not affected by happiness and distress, honor and dishonor, fame and infamy. Somebody who has very, very high personal morals and ethics and integrity. And we start to look at those symptoms, and then we also look at, are there descriptions of God, are those persons' descriptions of God in accord with the descriptions of God given by other persons of similar qualities over the millennia in every tradition of the world. Now, we may say, well, some of these descriptions somewhat differ. The fact that some of these descriptions somewhat differ tells us that God is not an object, but a person. So if I was asking everyone here, please describe this cup of water, we could all give practically identical descriptions. The color, the shape, the weight, and so forth. But if I ask all of us here, please describe this person, we would all give very different descriptions. There'd be some overlapping commonality, but there'd be different descriptions. Even how we relate to our spouse, how our spouse knows us, is different from how our children know us, which is different from how our friends know us. So the fact that you find some of these differences has some indication we may be dealing with a person. Now, we can also understand something about God if he writes his own autobiography. So I can understand something of a creator of something by asking someone who knows them. But I can also see, did the person say anything about themselves? So then we have to ask that question. Does God write anything about himself? And again, he does. So we find in all the cultures of the world, there are scriptures where God describes something about himself, something about his own nature. So we have these descriptions of others who claim that they have met him, and then we have descriptions that he's given about himself. So as we are part of the Gaudiya Sampradaya, coming from the Vedic tradition, I'm going to look in that tradition, and I'm not saying there aren't good and valid definitions of God in other traditions, but I'm going to be giving you now a description of God from our own tradition. So the tradition that I represent here today is many, many thousands of years old. It originally started actually with Brahma and Madhvacharya, and this has descriptions in books like the Bhagavad Purana, the Bhagavad Gita, and many works of our great teachers of the past. And I would like you, as you're listening to these descriptions, some of them are going to seem perhaps fantastic, or perhaps some of them will intrigue you to study further. So we're going to look at the Vedic literatures to learn something of the nature of God, the expansions of God, the energies of God, and the relationships. So what is his nature? So it's described in the Vedic literatures that we can understand God in four ways. One is as the universe itself. So it says in the Bhagavad Purana, O personality of the form of the universe, O soul of the universe. The universe itself can be understood as the form of the Lord, with the Lord as the soul of the universe, as if it's one great body, and we are each a little cell in that body. The Lord can also be understood as what's called the Brahman, the all-pervasive light and being. When people talk about God as just the energetic, the light, the being, existence, without form, without qualities, that is one of the manifestations of God. Another is what's called in Sanskrit the Param Atma, which means the self of the self. This is the God we understand as the creator, the maintainer, the witness, the neutral friend. When most religions talk about God in a personal way, they're referring to this Param Atma. Atma means self, Param means above. The self of the self. You could think of it like each of our cells in our body is alive, but we're like the chief life in our body. So each of us is alive, and then this form of the Lord is like the chief life of the life. But he's there as a neutral witness, giving people the results of their karma, maintaining the universe as an observer. The only real relationship that one can have with the Lord in this form is that of awe and reverence. But the Vedas teach us that there's yet another manifestation of God. And this is as an infinitely multifaceted person. The descriptions of this unlimitedly multifaceted person is that his names, his forms, and his actions are all absolutely him. So my name is not me. right? If you're 1,000 miles away calling my name, I'm not there. If I just say water, water, that doesn't work. I have to actually drink the water. But with Krishna, his name, Krishna, or any of his names, his form, just like we have the form of the Lord here, his actions are the same as himself. There's no difference. And his form is unlimited. There's no end to his form. Therefore, when he appeared on this earth, and his great devotee looked in his mouth, she saw there was the whole universe. At the same time, he appears to have a bounded form. So his form is unlimited, and yet it appears to have a boundary around it. He appears to be able to wear jewelry and clothes and so forth that have a particular measurement, where at the same time, when you look inside of him, you see that there's the whole universe. His senses are interchangeable. So we can only see with our eyes and hear with our nose. Now, some people have some interchangeable senses. Yes, have you ever heard about that? People who can hear colors or taste music. It's called synesthesia. And people who have this particular condition like it very much. They don't want to be cured of it. So Krishna has this synesthesia absolutely and totally. So he can see with his nose, he can eat with his fingertips. Any part of his form can do anything of any other part of his form. He has unlimited qualities. We can look at just some of them. He's very grateful. He never forgets even the slightest service done for him. Even the tiniest thing. Krishna says, Patram pushpam palam toyam yome bhakta prajati tadaham bhakti parikram ashrami parikatmana. If you just offer Krishna a flower or water, he never forgets them. We may forget the good that people do for us, but Krishna is so grateful that even if you do the tiniest thing with love for him, he can repay you unlimitedly. He's very dependable. He's reliable in all circumstances. He says, Niryoga Kshema Atmavan, don't worry about what you have, what you lack. Worry about the spirituality, because Yoga Kshema Vaham Yaham, I will take care of you. And he's so dependable that he's fair even to those who are evil and envious. We talked earlier about the law of karma. If you hate God, if you don't believe he exists, but you follow the moral rules of karma, you will get a good result. It's not that if you don't believe in God or if you hate God, that he's going to send you to hell. No, it's not a fact. Actually, in the Bhagavad Purana, it describes that there's opulent, heavenly domains for moral, ethical atheists. They're called the subterranean heavenly planets. And if you follow the laws of karma, even if you hate God, you can go there and have so much opulence. He's very compassionate. And we might say, but there's so much distress going on in the world. But Krishna gives us the means to mitigate that distress if only we will take advantage of it. Right? I had a conversation today with someone who said, well, somebody was having a hard time and I was willing to help, and they're like, no, I'll just do it this way. So Krishna's willing to help, he's willing to be compassionate, but we have to accept that. And he's actually fulfilling all of our desires. It may not appear like that, but that is because we are often foolish with what we desire. And a lot of what we're getting presently is due to foolish desires in the past. Now, he has innumerable expansions and forms. He has a form that's half lion, half human, a form that's a gigantic fish, a form that's breathing out universes, a form that's a gigantic boar, a form that fights with Ravana. He has a form of universal love as Lord Chaitanya. He is different from us, the souls. We are very infinitesimal, and he is infinite. We have all of the qualities of God in our spiritual form, but to only an infinite degree. And he has multifarious energies, Prasta Shakti Vividai Vishwayate, which we can describe as spiritual energies, jivas, ourself, the living being, and material energies. Now actually, we, the jivas, are ultimately spiritual energy, but because we can choose to be in material illusion, we are considered a marginal energy. And one can have an infinite number of relationships with Krishna. In scriptures like the Bhagavad Purana and the Bhagavad Gita, we learn about these varieties of relationships. We can see Krishna as our dear friend, like Arjuna does in the Bhagavad Gita, or like his friends do in Vrindavan, playing with him as if they are his equal, where Krishna is meditating on how to save them from dangers. We can feel that Krishna is our beloved child, as Mother Yasoda does, or Nanda Maharaj. And we can feel that Krishna is our beloved, as his Queen Satyabhama, or his beloveds, Srimati Radharani and the Gopis. And we can have any of these relationships with Krishna as per our own desire. So we've looked at just a little bit of our understanding of the nature of God from the Vedic literatures, especially from the Bhagavad Purana, the Bhagavad Gita, and the other works of our acharyas. In the particular line here, our Gaudiya Sampradaya, and that has one branch of this, is the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So I hope you've learned something about how we understand what is the nature of God, and if you would like to learn more, then we have so many books written, translated by Srila Prabhupada, by his followers, written by our various acharyas, that you can go more deeply. And if you'd like to discover this for yourself, so we have just in a few minutes our kirtan, where we're actually chanting the names of Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And if one chants these with attention and with care, it is possible to experience God for yourself. You don't need to just go on someone else's testimony. So we have a few minutes if anybody would like to ask a question or add anything. Yes, and nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Thank you for a beautiful class. Really, really nice. I got to hear your meeting on Instagram. We were a little late, so sorry about that. So there's so much suffering in the world. What extent does God want us to just transcend it all and leave versus alleviate the suffering?
To what extent does God want us to leave versus alleviate it? All of our suffering is ultimately dependent on how we view reality. In one sense, there is no such thing as objective suffering. It's how you think about it. And you can say, well, some things seem pretty objective. But it still comes down to how you view it, how you interpret it. So Krishna certainly wants us to change our way of viewing the world so that we no longer experience our life as suffering, even when externally things happen that appear to be suffering. At the same time, he would like us to create a society where there was minimal external suffering. So one of the things I've worked on, my latest book is called Career Dharma. And what we're looking at there is what would be an ideal socioeconomic system according to Scripture. With the idea that if we had this ideal system, the amount of suffering in the world would tremendously decrease. It was actually kind of fascinating. The deeper and deeper we got into the subject, the more my co-author and I were like, wow. Although it seems that there's this just plethora of problems, a lot of them could be solved if we had the socioeconomic system that's given in the Scriptures. And because we're violating that, it's like we're not following the instruction manual. You know? So if you're using the world in a way that it's not intended to be used, then you're going to have all kinds of suffering that's completely unnecessary. And the example I always give is that the person who designed this building did not design the walls and the windows to cause suffering. But if you try to walk out the building through the wall, you will suffer. And that's not the fault of the architect or the builder. Or if you try to get out through the window, I assume that also would be rather inconvenient and suffering. And if you had a two-story building, that would be extreme suffering. So there's a way to function in the world so that the suffering is greatly reduced. And the descriptions in the scriptures are that there's many, many, many inhabited planets in this universe. And that the planets where people are more in consciousness of God, their external suffering goes down to almost none. That the more you have this awareness, the more you have this harmony, then the less there's even external suffering. So both things should be there simultaneously. I should change my consciousness, my awareness, so that my experience of life is different. So that my experience of life is that it's full of wonder, and it's full of joy, and it's full of love, and it's full of mystery. Prabhupada writes, materialistic people see the world as very aggressive, but those who are in proper Krishna consciousness see everything as happily situated. And we should also try to create an ideal society. We should work on that as well. And we have the blueprint for it. It's a question of whether or not we actually want to follow that blueprint. So I think we're out of time, yes?
I think we have more time.
It's
More questions.
7 o'clock exactly. Anybody else have something else that they'd like to add? That's an excellent question, by the way. Thank you so much. Yes.
When Krishna has this conversation with Arjuna about the Mahabharata, Arjuna asks, how can I kill my cousins in this battle and fight my own family?
Yes.
And Krishna says, well, this is your karma, the karma of when you have injustice, you must take it out.
Yes, you must take out injustice, yes.
And so, in terms of that period of when he asks about alleviating suffering, instead of just avoiding, I think Krishna has designed the universe in a way where it is within him, so there's both sides of yin and yang.
Yes.
And it causes a ton of balance in itself. And I want to know what you thought, what your take on that.
So if I understand you correctly, you're saying that in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is telling Arjuna, yes, you should fight to kill these people who are evil and causing injustice in the world. At the same time, Krishna is telling Arjuna to transcend suffering in his own internal consciousness. He's telling him that consider your desires like rivers flowing into the ocean, which is ever being filled but always remaining still. And be detached from attachment and aversion. Don't be influenced by attachment and aversion. And he definitely says, if you have your proper consciousness, you will not be affected by the miseries of this world. They may be there externally, superficially, but they won't affect you. So he's telling him both things. He's saying, put your consciousness in a way where you realize that you're actually a spiritual being, that you're not actually experiencing the things of this world. And at the same time, work in this world for justice. Work in this world to alleviate suffering. So yes, those two parallel things are quite clearly there in the Bhagavad Gita. But work to alleviate suffering not as that you're the doer, but as my agent, Krishna is saying. That Krishna is saying, I want to alleviate the suffering in the world, be my agent. To do that with detachment. That you're really a spiritual being. That what's happening here to your body and your mind is not actually happening to you. Yes?
Thank you very much for a beautiful class. Thank you for finishing on time. We are extending it, but one can go from here. So one question you presented very nicely about how we can perceive God, see God. You gave us so many what you call, evidence through logic and through saintly people, through God's interaction in different traditions. I want to ask you about yourself, your journey. You have been in this movement 52 years, initiated by Srila Prabhupada, and perhaps 55, when your husband met Srila Prabhupada. How have you balanced your life? And you have accomplished a lot over the years. So I want to hear your biography, in short, and your personal experiences. And your personal experiences as to how you handle it. Because the material world that we all live in is the same for you and for us. How did you navigate all this? Now you've written this book.
And she wants this in short.
So, as you said, like how do we believe in a saintly person? The credibility, the integrity, the intent, the character that they have. So,
Well, it took me quite a while, an embarrassingly long time actually, before I understood that the 4 defects of human beings applied to me. You know, I would hear about, conditioned souls have imperfect senses and are illusioned and can make mistakes and can cheat. And I would think, oh yeah, that applies to all those other people. So I'd say a big change happened with me when I realized that that applies to me. And I realized that my perception of reality and reality are never the same. Never, ever. That I was accepting as objective truth, not only what my senses perceived, but how my mind interpreted the perception of my senses. So that was a huge step for me in detachment from material miseries. I realized that first of all, my perception was not accurate, and second of all, whether or not I perceived things as suffering was a perception, not a reality. So I will not tell you that I'm at 100%, but I will tell you that more and more and more I've been able to detach myself and be an observer. That doesn't mean that there's nothing that happens in the body and the mind, but that I'm able to observe that. I noticed that quite clearly when a couple years ago one of my grandsons died. He was 24 years old and died in a vehicular accident. And my mind went through grief. It's not that I didn't go through emotional grief, which affected me physically as well. And it affected me, I had probably about 10 days where my ability to connect with other people emotionally was very hampered. I just really couldn't do it. That my mind and body were so much dealing with its own emotional turmoil that there was no energy left over at all. That was all there was. But simultaneously, I was an observer. So I personally wasn't suffering. And I had a sense that I wasn't suffering. I'm just like, oh, this is interesting. What's going on in my mind? What's going on in my body? This is interesting. I just let it be. I didn't try to stop the grieving process. As Krishna says, don't have attachment, don't have aversion. He says in the 14th chapter, one who does not hate illumination, attachment, and delusion when they appear, nor long for them when they disappear, knowing that the modes alone are active, always remaining neutral. So I saw, okay, it was emotionally wrenching. I think the most difficult moment, for sure, the most difficult moment was at the cremation, to see my son light the cremation fire for his own child. And it felt like my clothes were on inside out and backwards. I felt there was something wrong in the fabric of reality. I was thinking this should be my cremation, that my children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren are attending. they should be coming to my funeral. I shouldn't be going to theirs. And it was, you know, it was a very emotionally tumultuous thing, but I let it be. I let it be. I didn't try to fix it. I didn't try to change it. I didn't hate that I was feeling that way, nor did I embrace it and say, well, I'm going to just wallow in this. I just observed it, and I let it be. And there was a kind of detached curiosity. So again, I can't say that I'm 100%. I'm not going to say that. That would be very foolish of me for many reasons. But I do see that as I've matured in spiritual life, that more and more and more I have this sense of being the observer of life and not identifying with my body and my mind and not identifying with the world and therefore not being so affected by them. Now, we're not supposed to talk publicly about our personal relationships with Krishna. That's something we're actually encouraged not to do. I mean, I was with Srila Prabhupada in 1975 in the airport where these reporters kept asking Prabhupada, have you seen Krishna? And Prabhupada says, yes, I've always seen Krishna. They said, at what age did you become enlightened? And Prabhupada kept saying, that I cannot say from the age. And they kept pressing and pressing and pressing. And finally he said, maybe 4 years old. I will say that I have my own personal experiences, which are my experiences, and they may mean absolutely nothing to any of you. You have to have your own personal experiences. But I have my own personal experience, and I'm absolutely convinced that God is real, and that Krishna is a form of God, and that he's real, and he's accessible, and one can see him, and one can talk to him, and one can touch him, and one can have an actual relationship with him. So I am absolutely 100% convinced of this by my own experience. But again, my own experience has absolutely nothing to do with any of you. You have to have your own experience. If I go to an ice cream stop and I'm telling you, I'm convinced that ice cream is real, that I'm eating ice cream, great. You have to buy your own ice cream. And you have to eat your own ice cream. I will also say in terms of my biography that had I known when I joined the Hare Krishna movement what it means to confront and give up false ego, I never would have joined. Absolutely 100%. So it's a very wonderful experience, but it's a lot more intense than I had any idea. And I didn't realize, when we say Cheto Darpanam Arjanam, you're going to clean the mirror of your consciousness. I didn't realize how dirty my mirror was, folks. And I didn't realize of what I was going to have to confront in my internal attachments, even on a subtle level. That when I was 17 and decided to join the Hare Krishna movement, I thought I was already a very spiritually enlightened, very spiritually elevated being, and that probably in a month or two I would become fully enlightened. And I was completely convinced of that. I was convinced that I already loved Krishna and everything was like that. And it was quite a while before I started really seeing, wait a minute, I'm holding on to evil. Actual evil, I'm holding on to evil. I have mentalities and motives that are selfish, that are destructive, that are cruel, and I'm calling them something else. I'm thinking they're something else. I realize most people will say, yeah, I've made mistakes, but I have good motives. And I realize that actually as conditioned souls, we may do some things right, but we have a lot of ill motives. And so seeing that I had ill motives was devastating, surprising. And at first when I started seeing this, I didn't know how to deal with it at all. I really just didn't know how to deal with it. And for a long time, when I started seeing these things as part of my spiritual practice, I would just try to deny them or push them away. It actually came one time when I said, my dear Krishna, please teach me spiritual lessons in some joyful way. And I said, and I will promise that I will learn the lesson and act on it. So it's a very long story, but anyway, that's what happened. I was in a very joyful situation, and I got to see that something that I thought was wonderful and valuable about myself, that I really, really liked about myself, and that I thought was so spiritual, was exactly the opposite. That it was all just pride and envy and greed. It was just a bunch of nastiness that I was disguising as something very good. And for the first time, instead of trying to push it away or deny it, I looked at it straight in the face and went, this is really awful. Wow. And not only is this awful, but I'm holding on to it. It's my responsibility. So everyone is afraid to see that. Everyone's terrified to see it. Absolutely terrified. But once you see that you're the one holding on to something that's nasty and evil, then you realize you have the power to let go. As long as we think that we're a victim, as long as we think that these things are being forced upon me, which Arjuna also asked this question, why am I being forced to do things that I apparently don't want to do? Then we're helpless. But when you say, I'm holding it, you can let go. And once you let go, you find Krishna just removes it. And it was like, wow, I'm free of that thing that I didn't even know was weighing me down. So that's a very interesting part of the spiritual journey. My personal conviction is that the vast majority of people on this planet who are serious external practitioners of any particular religion, pick whatever religion you like, I don't care which one it is, never go through that process, which is what gives religionists a bad name in the world. So you have people, they're very strict about their particular religion. Again, doesn't matter which, pick any one. But they never really want to look at the heart, and they never really want to let go of the things that are coming between them and God. They never want to face, I am choosing evil. I am choosing selfishness. I am choosing to take delight in doing something that is harmful to others. I mean, we could say, meat eating is a really good example of this. They're not thinking, I'm getting pleasure in doing something that's causing pain to somebody. But there's so many subtle permutations of this. It's not that, well, I'm a vegetarian, I don't do. There's so many subtle permutations of this mentality. So I'd say that's also a very important part of my biography. I'm trying to do this as fast as I can. Is this helpful?
Thank you very much for being so.
I'll tell you one other very important part of my biography. And that is, when I joined the movement, I joined in large part because Srila Prabhupada was preaching non-sectarianism. I never ever would have joined a movement that was saying, we're the only ones who have the truth and everybody else is deluded. And never ever would I have walked in the door or something like that. But one thing I understood, actually, I think to a large extent by the grace of my son and ways in which Krishna dealt with me in my life, is that I gradually fell into a sectarian way of thinking. I gradually fell into a way of thinking that because the Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy is so complete and answers everything in ways that objectively many other systems of religions and spirituality do not, that we were intrinsically better. And that I kind of lost that initial concept. And this is something I've really worked at gradually trying to rediscover. How can I feel that I'm in the best process, at the same time feel that there are so many genuine processes? How can I do that? How can I have an actual non-sectarian view, at the same time feel, yes, I'm doing the thing that's the best? And this has been quite a journey of discovery for me. And how to come to that kind of balance with that. And I guess the final thing I'd like to say, because you talked about balance, is I put a lot of energy into seeing no separation between any parts of my life and spirituality. So one of the reasons I joined the Hare Krishna movement was I wanted to from the time I was 4. I wanted to have some system of spirituality where it wasn't like a once-a-day thing or a once-a-week thing, where spirituality pervaded everything in my life. So it's a topic I've put a lot of care and thought and study and research into, written a couple books on the subject, and I feel that it's something where I keep evolving in that, to really see my Krishna consciousness and how I deal with everyone and everything. Again, I'm not fully there, but it's something that I see is evolving and blossoming, and that I really appreciate this aspect of seeing that that Krishna is everywhere and that everything is a part of him, and that there's nothing that I can do or think or say that has to remain separate. Is that short enough?
That's wonderful. I also want to add, out of humility, you did not mention this, that
Well, I don't have any of that.
you have certain strengths, your competence, and you're such a good orator, you are a teacher, you are an educator, so you went ahead and acquired a PhD, and then you gave it back to the society. You wrote books that will help children, that will help the society. And you were talking about this career dharma, how we can develop a socio-economic system. So you did not go to the outside world to work. You stayed in the movement and you created your path in such a way that will dovetail with your competence and will always keep you in vision.
Yes, but I really encourage people to work in the outside world and transform the world.
Thank you very much.
I would love it if, the head of Monsanto was a God-conscious person. Wouldn't that be nice?
Be healthy.
Wouldn't it be nice if the heads of
Yes.
state of the countries of the world were God-conscious? Prabhupada said the heads of all the countries of the world should be God-conscious. And one reporter said, oh, do they have to join the Hare Krishna movement? He said, no. He said, mathematics is mathematics in any university. So it would be wonderful if those people who were actually conscious of the Lord and really dedicated were out in the world as doctors, as lawyers, as business people, as artisans, as university professors, as everything. That is a society that I personally envision, that kind of a society.